Hello, friends. Welcome back to Yoga for Dentists. I'm Dr. Josie DeVidio, longtime dentist and certified yoga teacher. Today, I am chatting with Dr. Natanya Brown, who is an endodontist that has a passion for helping dentists manage urges to overeat, especially after a stressful day of seeing patients, so that you can get to your goal weight and stay there for good. Dr. Brown, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's honestly a huge treat to get to be on your show. So thank you so much for having me.
You are quite welcome. I'm excited to chat with you. I've been following you on your Instagram. You have some great tips on there for weight management and also stress management. And I just love everything you're doing there. So I wanted to bring you on so that our listeners and our viewers on YouTube can benefit from your knowledge and expertise.
Awesome. Thank you.
So what I think is interesting on your Instagram feed is, you're not just giving like run of the mill tips for people, but you're also giving them a lot of mindfulness tips and techniques. So before we dive into all of that though, I want to know more about you, your journey, what led you to this particular passion, and especially why is the focus on dental professionals?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, to thoroughly and yet concisely answer your question, I just want to take you back about 6 years ago. And I was running my endodontic practice. I had two young sons, one that was still nursing. And, I would be, running around the dental office, keeping patients happy, keeping staff happy, keeping, my referring dentist happy. And then I would get home, we would have dinner, I'd get my boys to bed, and I would just look forward to that moment at the end of the day that I could finally have, even if it was like 15 or 20 minutes, to just sit on the couch with my husband and veg out. And that would almost always, actually, I could definitely say always, involve some form of a snack, a dessert, a second dinner. Sometimes it was as simple as a bowl of cereal or two or three. And that was the moment I would look forward to. That was like my reward for having like survived a crazy chaotic day. And that's not necessarily problematic, except I had baby weight left on me from my second pregnancy that I wanted to get rid of. And I felt like I was doing a lot of the right things, but I still wasn't able to lose the weight. So I had tried every diet imaginable. I mean, I could just list them all for you. I tried all sorts of different workout regimens. I was pretty active. And so I felt like I was eating healthfully. I actually felt like I was working out. And yet I wasn't losing weight. And so that actually led me to seek out weight coaching. And so I was introduced to weight coaching. So enter weight coaching, stage left. And I was really blown away because what I learned through coaching was that I was actually approaching weight loss and my weight loss journey just completely the wrong way. And I was really quite surprised because, like I said, I really felt like I was doing the right things. Like I wasn't eating Twinkies and Oreos all day long. I was active and I thought I was really making healthy choices. But what I learned through coaching was that I was really approaching things in the wrong way. And so, what I mean by that specifically is that, like when I would overeat, I would really take that as an opportunity to beat myself up. And instead of really getting curious and figuring out like what caused me to do that, I would think, let's just shove it under the rug and tomorrow's a brand new day and we'll start from scratch. I also think I had some degree of shame because I felt like, I'm an endodontist, I'm an educated person. I should know how to take good care of myself.
Yeah.
And yet it was so hard for me to lose the baby weight. So the techniques that I learned through weight coaching, they helped me not just lose the weight, but really they helped me with all different aspects of my life. And I went from feeling really stuck to feeling empowered to make the best decisions I could for myself. And one of the biggest obstacles I felt before I came to weight coaching was I felt like I just didn't have a whole lot of extra time and I didn't have a whole lot of extra brain space to be
Right.
devoting to this weight problem. And so what I learned were ways to make decisions for myself in a way that didn't necessarily have to take more time and really led me to a place where I was not only able to lose the weight that I wanted to lose, but I was able to really improve other areas of my life so significantly that at that point I just continued to learn more and more. I was like, I need more of this. Like, this is fantastic. And that's ultimately what led me to become a certified life and weight loss coach through the Life Coach School, and specifically to feel compelled to offer weight coaching to other dentists that are struggling in the same way that I was struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've said a few profound things that I want to highlight. First, yes, we are educated healthcare professionals. It's not like we don't know what we need to do or what we need to avoid in order to maintain a healthy lifestyle. But I think what it boils down to is that bandwidth, the mental bandwidth of, I can't deal with this right now. And, for me, a bag of Limon Lays on the couch while I flip through Netflix is way easier than having to think about and process what it is that I'm feeling and why, and how can I make a better choice. But like anything in life, things seem hard when you don't really have the tools. But once you develop the tools and you start practicing them, things get easier. And it is, rewarding when you feel better than the lemon chips. Inevitably, I always feel bad after the lemon chips. Always. But I still go to it because of the bandwidth and, not wanting to utilize the tools that I have. And really, I think ultimately what it boils down to, at least what it sounds for me, what it boils down to, and what it sounds like you're saying too, is it's ultimately a matter of mindfulness and awareness. Awareness of why you're feeling this way and mindfulness in making choices. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could talk hours on just that alone, but absolutely. And really, probably the best way I describe my weight coaching to people is that I help people to make the best decisions for themselves, specifically when they're feeling like part of their brain is telling them, I want to do this. And then another part of their brain in the moment spontaneously is telling them, no, you really want to eat those cookies in front of you. Right. So, how can you really make decisions and execute on them with your best long-term interest in mind?
Right. And that's a key too, is, it's not like you need to forsake all the things that you love, but at least if you eat them mindfully with an awareness, then you can still enjoy those things, but not to an unhealthy degree where it's actually working against you. And,
Yeah,
it's not helpful in the long term.
absolutely. Absolutely. And so, I guess to kind of further elaborate on that point, the Japanese have an amazing word, like a term that's kuchi sabishi. I don't know if I'm saying that properly. Kuchi sabishi. And this means lonely mouth, like it like translates to lonely mouth. And so it's basically, the desire to be eating when you're not really hungry. Like, you just want to be eating something, and it's fulfilling a need outside of hunger. And so
Right.
that's really what is at the heart of my work with people, is starting to really become in tune and aware of their levels of hunger and really why they're eating to begin with. And then really creating a pause that's long enough to be able to think of that question and answer it for yourself before you actually start eating. And so, it's my belief that as humans, we have a full spectrum of emotions that we can feel on a day to day basis. And perhaps we could lump them into two categories: good feelings and bad feelings. And what society has taught us is that there's really never a bad reason. Like, you don't really need any substantial reason or excuse to eat. In other words, if you have a negative feeling, you can always feel better by eating or potentially consuming alcohol. And likewise, on the flip side, if you're having a positive feeling, then you should be celebrating it with food
Right.
or with alcohol. And in
Yes.
that sense, perhaps the food or alcohol is thought to maybe intensify the joy of the feeling that you're having. And on the counter side, if you're having a negative feeling, hopefully the food or the alcohol might numb or, take away that feeling. And so what's interesting is that what we're essentially being taught is, or not taught rather, is how to just process those feelings without feeling the need to resort to food or possibly alcohol. And it's not actually that the food is inherently a problem or that the alcohol is actually a problem. But let's say, here's an example. You're busy at work and your assistant calls in sick, you're frustrated, perhaps you're angry. And then a patient walks in with, a plate of donuts, and you may think to yourself, this is great. This is going to make me feel better. You may not have that as a conscious thought, right? But subconsciously, you may be frustrated and think, like, yeah, I deserve a donut. It's a really
Right.
tough day.
Yeah.
And and so in essence, that donut might make you feel better in that moment for a few moments, right? Like
Right.
maybe it does make you feel happy, but it's not actually getting rid of the problem that your staff member is not there and that you're feeling frustrated, right? And if you're looking to lose weight, what it's doing is now creating a secondary problem. It's making it harder for you to lose the weight that you want to lose, right? So the question is, what would it look like? You kind of alluded to this earlier, but what would it look like to process the feeling without needing to resort to something, right?
Yeah. And that's very hard because, you know, as an Italian person, all right, I'm technically Sicilian. That only matters to Sicilians and Italians, but here in the US, you would consider me Italian. So I grew up eating and food and drinking. I mean, we've been drinking wine since forever. So, yes, always with the celebration, always, for any reason. You don't feel good, eat something, and I think of also one of my favorite movies is My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Hmm.
And in my practice, we used to show movies. So, and that was a patient favorite. But there's a line in that stands out to me in our conversation where, they're talking about whatever trouble they're having with the wedding. And the mom goes, "Oh, just eat something." Like that's her answer to every problem. And I totally relate to that,
Yeah.
and of course, patients would give us treats. Our endodontists or oral surgeons would send us treats, to the generals. And those were our favorite days when we would get the treats, and not that, again, like you're saying, not that those treats are inherently bad or receiving them or even eating them are bad. But if you're doing it without an awareness, then yes, you're setting yourself up for trouble later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And really so I guess another way to describe the way we can use food or alcohol is to seek unconsciousness through it, right? So we're seeking some level of unconsciousness, mindlessness. And so what would it look like in turn on the flip side to really be mindful about our choices? And so, so frequently I hear people say that, they don't feel like they have control over food. Like if a patient does come in with donuts, it's just an automatic. Like maybe
Right.
you've already gotten one down and you're halfway through the second one before you realize what you're doing. And so it's really just about starting to create a pause and deliberately asking yourself, like, am I actually hungry? And if so, great. If not, like, why am I eating? And kind of delving a little bit deeper so that you can be really mindful about your actions.
Yeah. And to even simplify it one step further, I remember hearing someone say, before you put something in your mouth or before you decide you're going to eat something specific, to ask yourself, is this going to bless my body or curse my body? And depending on your answer, it should be easier to make a decision.
Absolutely.
Now, do you think there's a difference between males and females in this department? Like, do you think that women tend to gravitate towards food more and men maybe towards alcohol more? Or have you noticed anything like that?
Yeah, that's a really wonderful question. Of course, I can't really say 100%, but I do think in general, we are taught that, to process our feelings in different ways. And in general, I think um, it is more socially acceptable, perhaps, for women to talk about their feelings, perhaps with their friends or their family. Um, Whereas I do think that men on some level tend to be a little bit more isolated and less likely to talk about, the stress of the day or any feelings of loneliness or any kind of stress that they may be having. So to answer your question, I don't know that I would know enough to say that women are more likely to go to food and men more likely to go to alcohol. I'm sure there may be some studies or some like actual evidence on that, but really just kind of taking that higher level view. My opinion would be that women may have more tools to process feelings, or it just may be more socially acceptable. However, I think everybody has an equal opportunity and is taught equally to resort to food as an option, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So I know that you offer a program specifically for dentists, if they're looking to lose some weight or, just to even have more awareness about what they're eating. Can you speak a little bit to how your program is maybe different than the various diets that are out there?
Absolutely. So, really what makes my work with clients so different than a traditional diet is that when we look at your average diet, they're just focusing basically exclusively on what you're eating and how much you're exercising. And that is, it is important, but it's really only one part of the bigger equation that will lead to weight loss. So with my clients, we certainly talk about food, we talk about exercise, but we're really delving deeper and asking, why are you eating to begin with? Like before you go to eat, are you actually hungry? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? And in that manner, really all aspects of one's life becomes highly, highly relevant in the entire weight loss equation. Now, there's a few different things that specifically tie into what causes us to be overweight to begin with. And so these are topics that I really delve in, rather deeply with my clients. And the first one is what causes us to be overly hungry to begin with. And so we talk about the physiology, the role of hormones and insulin. And then certainly we take a look at, what foods are you eating that can be contributing to your level of hunger throughout the day? And are
Right.
you eating the appropriate nutrients at each given meal to truly support you and make you feel satisfied and feel good on your journey? And then, really, a second part that is quite big is having too much desire for food, right? So it's one thing to say, for example, I'm going to do the keto diet and I'm going to remove all of these things from my diet. And I'm just going to focus on, this list of things that I'm allowed to eat. And that's great. But what happens when, I mean, you still have the same level of desire
Yeah.
to eat all the things that you've eliminated, right?
Right. And
So,
now
what
and now maybe you desire them more because they're forbidden.
Right. That's exactly what happens. And so when we think about, your average person that sets out on a diet, maybe they lose some weight. Maybe if they're lucky, they'll lose all the weight, but almost inevitably, they're going to gain all of it back or some portion of it back, because we're not really changing fundamentally what's going on in the brain.
Right.
And what would it look like? Like, wouldn't it be great if you could say, I'm going to do this diet, but I'm not just focusing on the food and the exercise. I'm actually reducing my level of desire for foods that don't serve me. And so that's exactly what I work with people to do. That's the goal, and we work with all the thoughts that come up with that, right? Like for a lot of people, they may have the thought that they want to intensely enjoy certain things to the same extent. And it almost sounds like sad if I were to say, how would you feel if you didn't fantasize over the donuts? And how would, what would your life look like if the plate of donuts showed up and you were like, meh, I could take it or leave it, Like,
Right.
what if that were possible? Right. And like, so this is what I help people to do. And we meticulously comb through the aspects of their life and certainly look at their diet, their exercise, but we're really getting into all the other aspects that will help to not just get them to lose weight, but to keep the weight off indefinitely.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, I can look back and I sometimes I still do it now. Like, oh, I can't wait. Like sometimes at nighttime as I'm going to bed, I'm already planning like what my breakfast is going to be. Like, oh, I can't wait tomorrow to have that coffee and I'm going to add the vanilla creamer and then I'm going to, and I like make this whole like it's almost like I hate to say it, but like mental masturbation. Like I
Yeah.
cannot wait for this meal and I'm going to think about it to the detail and that it's like satisfying, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
so it is a mental trick really that, like fools you into constantly, I don't know, it's like an awareness, but in the opposite way. It's like an over focus and
Mhm.
over awareness
Mhm.
instead of being aware of like, okay, why am I so excited about breakfast tomorrow?
Yeah.
Like, so
Yeah,
it's this weird
absolutely.
dynamic.
Absolutely. And part of what you're touching on is what I get into with my clients with, understanding why we have such a high level of desire for food. And part of that really stems from the dopamine that we get from food when we eat it. Like dopamine's released in our brain.
Right.
And it's pleasurable to eat. And here's the thing, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And but for instance, when you eat, let's say, an apple or foods in their natural state, that's going to produce a certain amount of dopamine as you're eating it.
Right.
In contrast, there's other foods that are perhaps containing sugar, perhaps they're highly processed foods. These foods release a much higher level of dopamine. And so when you eat them, your body and your brain says, wow, that's amazing. Like, I want more of that. Right. And
Yes.
so understanding how that works is really an integral part of being able to kind of separate yourself from that so that then you can make the concerted decision and the choice. Yes, I'm going to eat this in this quantity, and I don't have to be a slave to the food. I don't have to just be a zombie and mindlessly eat it.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting what you said too, as far as kind of like going to bed and planning breakfast and getting excited about it. And I'll talk about it probably a little bit later. But one thing I do recommend is meal planning. And it's interesting how we can plan, so on one hand, we could perhaps the example that you're giving me is like, how is this possible that the night before I'm planning my food and I'm fantasizing over it? But in the same way, we can look forward to a plan for a meal that we're excited about and that can really serve us and nourish us and feel good in our body and help us in our weight loss journey, right? Like what would that look like?
Right.
And how could we do that with the same level of excitement, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I know for a fact when I am good about planning my breakfast and I have like egg whites and a sweet potato and, when sometimes I even have like a half of an avocado. When I do that, I feel so much better than when I have, a Danish. Now, for me, it would have to be a gluten-free one, so that usually if I have any gluten-free sweets, it's like even higher in sugar than like a regular thing. So, it is I'm a smart woman. I know that the egg whites and sweet potato and avocado is gonna be better for me than the Danish, but some days I still pick the Danish.
Yeah.
So, obviously, there's mental work to be done.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm convinced of is that Lay's Limon chips are coated in dopamine or crack, one of those, but it is very hard for me to not eat those. There's
Yeah.
something seriously wrong there.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. It is a dopamine hit to the brain. It definitely is. And so that's why, people sometimes, I mean, I don't want to say a generalized statement, but in my dental friends, I have noticed that does seem to be a correlation between eating and drinking, so it's like the same. It doesn't matter what you're ingesting, whatever's hitting that dopamine button in your brain is what's going to make it harder to stop.
Absolutely. 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 Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more.
Now, if people want to, like, tell me more about how your program works. Is it a group program? Is it a one-on-one session? Are both available? What does that look like?
That's a great question. So, right now, I offer one on one coaching that may change in the future. But at this present moment, I offer one-on-one coaching. Typically, I work with people over a 6-month process. And so I invite people to set up a free call with me so that we can really start to get a sense of, what's keeping the person at their current weight? What are the different
Right.
obstacles as they perceive them? What have they tried in the past? And then we really formulate a plan that's going to work and enable them to feel excited about the process as they're making the best decisions for themselves, knowing that they can get to their goal weight and stay there. So, we basically tailor make everything for each person. It's not a cookie cutter plan at all. I have certainly plenty of recommendations and science based evidence to support my recommendations. But ultimately, it's a matter of helping people to make the best decisions for themselves.
Right. Well, it's a lot like dental treatment planning, right?
Yeah,
We can tell you individually what works for you, and we can help you, but ultimately it's up to you to maintain.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, I know that your website is awesome and you're offering a free weight loss for dentist quick start guide. So I'm going to put the link to that in the show notes for this episode. And if they sign up on your website, they'll also receive weekly weight loss motivational tips or prompts, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
So if you're listening to this and thinking, yeah, I want to explore this further, don't hesitate to check that out. Dr. Natanya Brown can also be found on Facebook and Instagram, and I will put the links for those in the show notes for this as well. Before we let everyone go, is there a couple of tips you want to leave them with in terms of things they can do today to just even start thinking about it or get started?
Absolutely. So, of course, I could talk about this for another few hours. And so I had to get really picky with what would be like the top 2 or 3 things I would recommend to people. Although, if you download the Quick Start Guide, you'll get 6 things that you could get started with immediately. But so I'll just talk about a couple. The first one, I mean, you've heard this before. If you fail to plan, you will be planning to fail. So you need to create a plan. Winging it typically does not work for most people. If it hasn't worked up until now, it's not going to spontaneously start working for you. So you need to create a plan. What that means is specifically decide in advance, how many meals do I want to be eating? Now, you can think about the entire week, but I typically recommend like the day prior, just one day ahead, looking at one day at a time and just saying, how many meals do I want to eat? Roughly, what's the time? Do I want any snacks? And really starting to be mindful about what you're eating and when. Now, this tends to really help to be the starting point for people to start to clean up any snacking that they may be doing when they're not actually hungry. So it's very different to be snacking when you are hungry versus when you're not hungry. A lot of the people that I talk to are struggling with that, after dinner time, that it just tends to really be such a tempting time to
Yeah.
unwind and mindlessly be snacking. So, creating a plan, that's the first step towards actually executing a plan that's going to help you get to where you want to go. That's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing is, and this is really related to the first one, is start to tune in as opposed to tuning out using food. And so every time you go to eat, ask yourself, like, am I truly hungry? And if I'm not hungry, like, what am I feeling right now? That can bring up uncomfortable feelings or even negative feelings. And it's okay. It's okay to be aware of them and to start to grapple with them in your mind. The third thing and last thing that I will say is that in the process of losing weight, we need to learn how to manage urges to overeat. That's something
Mhm.
that I not only talk about it with my clients, but I've got extensive videos on this on Instagram for free. But managing urges to overeat is really critical. And specifically, how do we do this without resorting to willpower? Willpower does not work. If there's one thing that I can say I tried for years and it did not work, was trying to use willpower to lose weight. If you think of willpower like a gas tank, and typically in the morning we have, our gas tank is full of willpower. And as we go about our day, perhaps seeing patients, if we have a stressful day in the office, if a staff member calls in sick, if we have one of these or several annoying patients, if we get in an argument with our spouse or our kids misbehave, all of these different things affect our available resource of willpower. So that
Yes.
is exactly why when the evening rolls around, most of us are more likely to give in to eating things that don't serve us or perhaps things that we may regret later. And so, how do we manage urges to eat without resorting to willpower, without feeling deprived? That's exactly what I help people with. And that's something that's absolutely possible, for all of your listeners too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you offer a lot of great tips on both Instagram and Facebook. Your handles for the listeners, Dr. Natanya, correct?
Yes, on Instagram, it's dr.natanya.
And I'll put those links in the show notes for this episode so you can just click on there depending on where you're listening or watching. But you have great tips there. And I just want to remind everyone to go to your website, which is drnatanya.com, and look for that Weight Loss for Dentists Quick Start Guide and sign up to get weekly weight loss motivation. Dr. Natanya Brown, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your expertise with the listeners. And I know that we'll see each other online soon.
Thank you so, so much, Josie. I have to say that likewise, I have felt truly inspired by the work that you're doing in the dental community, not just bringing yoga, but bringing mindfulness and just all sorts of healthy tips and healthy living to the dental community. So I feel like it was only a matter of time before we would cross paths, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to also talk to your listeners. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. You're quite welcome. Thank you. All right, friends, we will see you at the next episode. Subscribe to this channel or subscribe on your favorite podcast listening app to make sure that you receive notification for when the next episode airs. We will see you soon. Be well, friend.